Hello everybody, my name is Aaron.
And I'm Jimmy.
Today we're going to show you how we make this Helldiver B/01 tactical helmet.
Okay, yeah, that's a cool name.
We're going to start with the raw 3D print and show you the process from beginning to end, how we made this lovely helmet here.
Yeah, so grab yourself a cup of Liber-Tea.
And let's dive right into this helmet tutorial.
No!
Look familiar? Scenes like this are happening all over the globe, and you could be next. That is, unless you're willing to make the most important decision of your life. Prove to yourself that you have the strength and courage to be free. Join the Helldivers.
All right, so Aaron, you are the one that started off this whole project, right?
Yeah, I came in on the weekend because I wanted to get this helmet done as quickly as we could.
Yeah, it is really the zeitgeist right now. It is the game that everyone is talking about if you can play it.
Yep, and I mean, we play it as much as we can.
As much as they allow us to.
But this helmet here was printed on our Bamboo Lab X1 carbons in Polymaker CosPLA.
Yeah.
PLA formulated especially for cosplay.
It's incredible stuff.
They have two different versions, one that is more durable and one that is more sandable, but they both feature some of those qualities.
Yeah, one is more sandable and durable, one is more durable and sandable. They are just better than normal PLA. They print so much better. They work on fast printers naturally, which is amazing. Less likely to get clogs, quicker sanding, a print that is less likely to get dented. It's really good.
Yeah, I was a bit shocked even. As I was taking it off the printer, that supports just basically broke right off and I just lifted the print right off.
Yeah, it's because it's firm, you know? It doesn't want to hold on and like string and stuff. It's actually like really rigid.
And I should mention that the 3D files for this helmet are included in our Patreon rewards this month. They'll be available this month in February, then again in March. Otherwise, it'll be only for annual members.
Yeah.
So I printed this one off at 100% scale. It's still a little bit too small for my head.
Yeah, well, most things are.
Yeah, a big head. 24.5 inches in circumference.
It's the half matters.
Around the eyebrows. It really does right here. But I wanted to start sanding this helmet right away. I knew I was going to be using SLA resin to fill in the 3D print lines. And so actually what I did first was take a piece of 180 grit sandpaper and just rough sand the whole surface. I not only wanted to see how the CosPLA sanded on a raw print. The answer is pretty well. But that also helps mar the surface a little bit more, helps with the surface adhesion.
Yeah, it makes it grip to the resin, so that could be a problem as well when using resin, is that when you apply it and cure it, it'll actually not have adhesion to the surface and can later just peel off.
Right off. But sanding the entire helmet helps prevent that at least. Now the resin we're using is just regular SLA Elegoo brand resin, but it's also mixed with baby powder. That's just to essentially thicken it. Otherwise it's a bit too runny, can get away from you really easily. But I just brush it on with a paintbrush that is dedicated to this.
Yeah.
You are not going to want to reuse any of these tools in other applications. You want to make sure you have gloves on, a respirator on.
Proper PPE.
Yep, and we are not going to look directly at the UV light source that we use to cure the resin. So if you hit it with that UV light source, that resin will actually harden.
Yeah.
And it hardens quite hard, so.
It'll be a really good sandable surface for you to work off of. That'll get in between the lines and allow you to standardize that surface and smooth out that surface and ready for the next step.
Yeah, you want to do really light coats. There are some times where if you put too much, only the top layer will cure and there'll still be liquid resin underneath. So just do a couple thin coats. I think I did around 2 or 3 on this before we started sanding.
Yep.
Now, when you get to sanding, you can start hand sanding this resin if you hate yourself. I would definitely recommend a palm sander, an orbital sander of some kind. I believe on our orbital sander, I have just a 120.
Oh yeah, that'll do.
Nothing too rough, but having the power tool definitely helps speed it up a lot.
Yeah, you start to get these nice smooth surfaces you can see as the light hits it there. That's what you're looking for as you build up past that layer and build up in your grit over time.
And don't expect it to be perfect the first pass over. After the first pass of sanding and touching up a few spots, I'll hit it with some Rust-Oleum filler and sandable. That is just basically a very thick spray paint that helps fill in any small scratches, but it also helps show areas that still need some work.
Yeah, what do you do after that?
So after the first few passes with resin as a filler, I wanted to switch to a different material that's a little bit less permanent.
Sure.
And that is Bondo glazing and spot putty. We use it all the time for all of our helmets. It is the forbidden toothpaste, but you just take a little bit on your finger, rub it on some spots that still need filled and smooth. It'll harden after like 20 to 30 minutes, and then you can sand it with some regular old sandpaper.
Yeah, and that's really good for, as it's designed, filling in little tiny spots, little small areas, imperfections, and when you're hitting this with layers of primer, you'll start to see those spots, and it's super quick, just a little dab will do you.
Another cool tool that I like to use for this helmet was sanding sticks. Very thin but very long sanding sticks that allow you to get into those nooks and crannies of the helmet that might be a little bit tedious or difficult to get with your fingers as you're hand sanding.
Yeah, there's a lot of recesses here, a lot of sharp edges and corners that those would be fantastic for. And you also, I believe I saw you use a sanding sponge at one point as well.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of hand sanding involved, but I just wrapped a pad of sandpaper around that sanding sponge just for better grip. But yeah, that was just a little bit of hand sanding around, just kind of specifically target a few areas.
It's great to get around curves.
I'll put a layer of black primer over the helmet. That's just to kind of help solidify the helmet in a solid color, so I can see any other spots that still need more work a little bit more clearly. When the helmet is all different shades of primer, resin, and Bondo, it looks a little bit disorienting. Bringing that helmet all back into one color is a good like identifier coat. Yeah, so I think I just went back with the resin brush and added a few more layers of that. Repeated the process until eventually you get a pretty good surface to start painting.
And did you wet sand it after that to get that nice and perfect?
Yeah, so wet sanding is going to be one of the last steps that you do in the sanding process, just because
polishing it.
Yeah, you're polishing it instead of actually really smoothing it. You are smoothing it, but to the naked eye, you won't be able to really see a difference. But after you're done wet sanding it with like a 300 up to 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, it'll feel amazing. It'll feel smooth. It'll be perfectly ready for painting. The last thing I like to do before actually painting though is I'll get a sponge, put some dish soap on there, and actually scrub off the helmet.
Good idea.
You need to make absolutely sure that your helmet surface is clean of any dust, because through this whole sanding process, there's going to be a lot of dust being made, and a dusty helmet and paint doesn't really mix. So that soapy sponge helps clean the helmet off, and I just let it air dry in a secluded space where there's not a lot of passing air. You can use a fan to quickly dry off the helmet between your rounds of sanding.
Right. Just know that it's anywhere that will not get more dust on it later whilst it's wet.
Yeah, we don't want to blow a bunch of air and dust onto it as it's drying, but for the last round, we'll just let it sit for a couple hours.
This is essentially our perfect recipe for a finished helmet or prop. If you follow these steps, that is what is going to get you a perfectly smooth helmet ready for painting. You could not tell that this is a 3D printed piece. If you follow these instructions, you're there.
And you know what else, Jamie? This only took me like 4 hours
in total
of man hours. There's a little bit of waiting in between.
Of course.
But if someone tells you that you're going to be sanding a helmet for 12 hours, like straight, just slugging in circles, that's not the case.
You just need to know what you're doing. And if you follow this guide, you're going to end up with a helmet that's just like this. We did nothing special. You just need to know what to look for.
One thing that I had to do because of my big head, on the inside of the helmet, I used some elastic straps to connect the face to the back so that when I'm putting the helmet on, because it was a little bit too small for me, it will flex just a little bit, but that Velcro will pull it back in place. I just used some super glue and some activator to kind of lock it on one side, pull the Velcro or the elastic taut, super glue it on the other side, and you've got an enclosure system that can work around your big head.
Yeah, I wouldn't know, but great idea. Because you're keeping it at tension, it'll always try to pull back.
And there are these trapezoidal keys that we add to all of our helmets that kind of self-align it back in place. So it'll fit right over your head and look normal too. So Jamie, after this helmet was all smooth, I handed it over to you for painting, right?
That's right, yeah. I am the paint guy. Well, you just gave it to me with a flat primer black coat all over it, which was perfect. I mean, that is a large amount of this helmet is just largely flat black, which is around the mouthpiece, around the brow, the Mohawk, and then this, I guess, cryo port. I think that's what it is. So once we have that already, that means we can just quickly move on to the next major coat, which is that sort of gray metallic that you see along the main bulk of the helmet.
Right, because it's kind of black, but if you look in different reflections or different lightings, you're like, oh, that's not actually black. There's a lot of different layers or types of dark colors on this helmet.
Well, it makes it a lot more interesting to me. So once we have all the black masked off just with some painter's tape, that will leave the majority of this helmet that you just hit with, well, we identified it as a Rust-Oleum metallic charcoal, which is a sort of slightly gunmetal. It's a little bit brighter than that, but it's a really nice finish that will accept a lot of weathering down the line. So the majority of the helmet will be hit with that. Your little greeblies here, which are on the front and on the sides, they'll be hit with a Rust-Oleum aluminum.
I will not tolerate such behavior.
Thank you.
And that's the majority of the base helmet colors. Once you have all of that nice and dry, that will allow you to start masking off these stripes here and the stripes at the front. So these stripes here we identified as about 1.25 inches, and that is going from the front all the way to the back. To mix Imperial and metric, 1 centimeter strips along the side, because yeah,
Let them know how you feel about that in the comments.
I am international. What that allowed me to do was just mask off these areas. I kept the Mohawk still masked off, and I just built up my mask, going smaller and smaller segments at a time. And I hit it with Rust-Oleum ginger yellow. I think it was like the root rather than the me. So yeah, once those are dry, we take off all the masking tape, and that leaves us ready for the weathering pass.
Yeah, one of the best parts.
Yeah, this is when you start getting into the fun parts.
This is when it all really comes together. There's a lot of different tones to the helmet right now before the weathering, but the weathering really unifies it all together into one helmet, really.
First off, we hit the sides with these little Helldivers skull logos.
It's the little logo that pops up when you when your teammates meet their unfortunate end.
Yeah, trust me, I recognize that way too well. Too many 180mm bombardments. So there's those skulls there, and just a little chevron-y triangle here and here. That's it. That's all it is. Once we have those applied, I hit the entire helmet with a very dense wash of black oil paint and mineral spirits, making sure that between these coats, I've actually hit this with a layer of clear coat. The reason being is because this mineral spirit will actually strip the paint if there's not a barrier between the mineral spirits and the paint itself.
Right, because the paint is oil-based, and then that mineral spirit will just wash it off.
That's exactly it.
So that also helps with the metallic aspect of this paint not being so hydrophobic, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's why we don't use an acrylic water wash. A lot of metallics are actually very hydrophobic, and so black acrylic paint will just wash right off. It'll bead. It won't stain. That was the majority of it. All you need to do is just hit some of these edges with a little bit of bright silver to match the references, and you're done with the main helmet. All that's left is the really distinct, cool visor at the front.
Yeah, let's talk about the visor a little bit.
Yeah, you took this job on yourself, and the result was absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, I always love doing visors, and you can see they've got like these little ridges on the front. They've got like kind of a flat side to the visor here in the middle center. And if you want it to be as accurate as possible, you need to vacuum form the visor. Right. It can't just be a flat, solid black surface.
Yeah, it's quite three-dimensional. There's ridges and stuff all over it, and it'll look a little bit weird if you don't have it, if you ask me.
To do that, we are going to need a visor buck, and we're going to do a little bit of vacuum forming. Now, the visor buck was actually 3D printed.
Right.
They work for probably 3 pulls before they start melting.
Deforming in the heat.
Right. But if you want to 3D print it, I use the same techniques to smooth out the visor buck. You really only need to smooth out the top surface, the surface that will actually be the visor, but it can work just as well. After the visor buck was smoothed to around 600 grit, we were able to pull a sheet of plastic over it. We're going to use a 0.06 inch thick PETG sheet. PETG is just a form of plastic, but it's clear, you can see through it, and it takes heat pretty well. We're going to stick it in our highly advanced warming setup. This is just 2 space heaters with the safety switches taken off. They're just horizontal. We'll slide that sheet of PETG in between it, it'll start to warm up, it'll start to droop.
Right.
That's when you want to take it out and you turn on your vacuum former. The vac former that I got off of eBay. I just pre-builds them. Just hook it up to a shop vac that's going to suck the air out. So when I pull that sheet of PETG over, since it's hot, it will form over the visor buck and that shop vac will pull the excess air out, basically forming the plastic around this visor buck.
Yeah, we have videos in the past showing off this build, showing off how we made our own vacuum former in-house. It's a really cheap way that you can make these visors for yourself. You don't need to make really exotic resin bucks if you're not going to mass produce it. Right. You can make a cheap vac forming setup as long as you do it safely, and then make a new visor for every one of your helmets in the future.
There are a lot of helmets that use unique shaped visors, especially in Halo.
Yeah.
Halo has a lot. Pretty much
every single one is different.
Has a unique like ridge or detail on it.
Every game is different again.
But Jamie, the Helldivers visor isn't clear and transparent, is it? We've got to dye it. Now I'm going to be using iDye poly. The poly is important because it needs to actually bind to plastic.
Right, that makes sense.
If you just use the iDye, it's just for fabric. It will run right off the plastic. It won't work at all. You need the iDye poly. Just get in the black. What you need is a pot of water to about the level of where your visor is going to be totally covered in it. You bring that up to a boil. Once the water is boiling or almost boiling, put the packet in. The packet is just a little plastic sealed container of dye. You just chuck that right in. The boiling water will dissolve the casing around it and just spill out all of its dye in the container. There's a little color intensifier packet as well. You just mix that in, give it a stir. You need to stir it really well. I didn't do that too well on this version. There's a little bit of clump. You gotta really stir it. That's why it's helpful if the water is boiling. It's really like churning that dye through it all.
Yeah.
But once that dye is mixed in pretty thoroughly, we need to wait a bit, or at least add some colder water. We need the temperature back down. If we put this PETG in that 212 or 100 degrees Celsius water, it will warp.
Just like curl.
Yeah, it'll curl, it'll melt, it'll deform. We usually wait until the water's back down to around 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
So that's the range that you're looking for to make sure that your visor both gets dyed and then keeps its shape.
The second bucket you're going to need is a bucket of cold water. Now we're going to dip this visor after the water is cooled, and we're going to leave it in for about 4 minutes. After that 4 minutes has passed, we want to take that visor out and dip it into the cold water. That's basically just going to shock it to keep all the dye in and kind of like, I don't know, save its place. Kind of douses it, saves it, applies the dye. We'll put it back into the black dye for another 4 minutes, and we'll kind of repeat that process 3 or 4 times.
Until you get what you want, right?
Yeah. The last pass, after 4 passes, I'll leave it in for about 15 minutes. That's a real deep soak. The water has cooled down to around 140, 135 degrees Fahrenheit, but we'll leave it in there for 15 minutes as the last pass. Take it out, dunk it in cold water, and you've got a pretty dark visor.
This is a very dark visor, and the thing is, whilst wearing it, it is utterly clear inside.
Yeah, as you can see, bringing it to the camera, that's what it looks like looking through it. I do want to mention that as you're dyeing it, it will not look solid black. Part of what makes this visor appear so black is that it's dark inside the helmet.
Right.
It will be dark inside the helmet when you're wearing it. And so part of knowing when to stop dyeing is if you hold the visor against a dark surface, it will look dark. After the visor was done, all that's left is to slot it in, right?
That's right, yeah. We just use our visor clips that we hot glue into place and just friction fit it in. I can pull this out at any point now if I need to replace the visor, clean it, or anything like that. It's a non-permanent option that will allow you to do, a lot with this. And it's very cheap to print, very easy to put in, and you are quickly left with a complete helmet.
Yeah, that came out a lot quicker than I expected. I think I started this on Sunday, and today's Friday, so 5-6 day build.
Easy.
I really like how this helmet came out, Jamie.
It's a really cool helmet. I didn't expect to enjoy it quite as much as I did. It was a lot more interesting than I thought it was.
We're just loving the game so much. Like, it's so fun.
What I'm doing all weekend if possible.
Yeah, if we can get in. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you're feeling confident enough to take on a project like this yourself. Managed democracy is not as difficult as you might think to get. And if you're having trouble getting into the game, maybe give making the helmet a shot. Like I said, 3D files and the 3D prints that we sell, the physical kits, are available on our website. The link's below. And the files are also on the Patreon. in February and into March.
And if you don't think that you can make your own visor at home, we now sell finished visors to put into your own B01 tactical hat.
Right. It'll save you a bunch of money setting up vacuum forming and all that. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you at Malevelon Creek.